And from that, on reflection, um, looking at it kind of as a whole, and for you, your experience at school, is it seems that from what you're saying, and from what you're viewing when you go out and to schools and to help other children and to help those to in an informed way, is that our humanness again gets taken away from us. So we go to school and it's like a prison. And what I mean by that is that you're going to be forced to go to this place. So the separation anxiety is that you're going to go to school or you go to nursery or whatever it is, but you're going to be separated from your parents. And eventually you have to begin to learn things in a competition way. So we turn it into a competition by saying, oh, my child can speak at that age and they can walk at that age and they can this and they can that. And it starts off the being good enough instead of the humanness of you're already born that way. And again, never being asked who you are, constantly being put into this competition when you're born, and then you do this and you do this and you do this. And if you don't get 10 out of 10, you're not good enough, or all these things. Sometimes there's a pressure of putting a timer on or creating all these anxieties for children. So they've come into this world and they're being stifled almost by this, and then they have to get used to it. So when they're here in this environment and they're going to school, it's just because we normalise something, it doesn't mean that it's healthy. It just means that we've normalised it. So looking at that as a human being, as people, children are going to school and they might be harming themselves or they have certain beliefs about themselves. From what you're saying is that in your experience of going out or going into school, some of the belief is, as you mentioned, like bullying. And years ago, there'd be some schools, that would say there's no bullying that goes on in our school. So if we close our eyes and we don't want to hear about it because it might ruffle us too much, we're not going to deal with it. So there was lots of children that had to suffer the bullying. So, but in a way, that dehumanisation isn't recognised. That if you went to work and you were bullied, you would have the right to leave. Some people go to a tribunal because they think that bullying's wrong. And it becomes a big problem for people to be able to face the reality of who we are and what's going on in that place. And yet children don't appear to have these rights. They just suffer the bullying, and then they often move schools, or, these things aren't addressed in a whole, if to say, there's the bully, so what's gone on for that child? What's happening in their environment? Because people that bully usually have been bullied. And then for the child that's experiencing the bully in the first place. But the thing that becomes above all that and becomes above the humanness and the emotions and the feelings and the why is the education. So these become secondary. The programme becomes more important. These are more important things than this human being. This human being that's been pressurised from a very young age into coming into this, and then they're suffering in a certain way. And we want to ignore the suffering because we just need to have what we've made up in this invention is, say, certain statistics, percentages, all those things to make this school or whatever look good, to make what we're doing look good. And yet, not looking at the child or the humanness as that. So we're normalising things that aren't normal really for human beings because there's that much anxiety out there. So it's looking at that. So for you, your experience of school and what you're witnessing now, how do you feel about when you were at school and no one ever asked you a question or noticed your behaviour, as you said previously, of please don't pick me, and What was that like for you?
I absolutely hated school. I feared everything about it. I feared the other pupils. I feared the learning. I feared the teachers. I feared being noticed. My aim was to be invisible, and I just knew I didn't understand or link it with anything that had happened to me. I just knew I struggled each day to wanting to be alive because I felt that the world was too scary and that people were too scary, and I didn't seem to fit in anywhere. I didn't seem to appear to be like those people at school who are at breaks and before lessons and stuff chatting and that kind of thing. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to mix with people. I didn't know why. I just feared them. So I'd go to school right at the last minute before the bell went, go and hide in the toilets at break, at dinner time come home, and then go back just straight when the bell was going to go. I just knew that I didn't fit in. I didn't seem to feel what everybody else, how they were laughing and joking and enjoyed being together, and I didn't do that. And during...
Sorry, darling, so what you were saying is that you were invisible at school?
I think it realised that I was after I'd been there 4 years, and one of the teachers asked me if I were new.
What do you feel about that now, that after 4 years a teacher asks if you were new because you wanted to be invisible and no one noticed you?
No one. I felt I got noticed. I don't think I got noticed at parents' evening and things like that. My behaviour, I was, very compliant in school. Like I said, being invisible, which meant I just followed all the rules, stuff like that, homeworking on time and stuff like that, and didn't mess around and stuff. So and my parents would get told that I was quiet, I was shy, I need to speak up more, and the phrase that often people get is could do better. But what?
For who?
For them, because what they didn't realise was nobody asked me. I was doing the best that I can. I was sat in each lesson trying to learn, but as I've said before, with my fingers crossed, put under my hand, praying to God, please don't pick me, please don't pick me, please don't pick me. And when it was time, in English, where they take it in turn to read out and stuff, all I'd be doing was I couldn't concentrate on what was being read out or what was being said, because I was just scanning the next page thinking, do I know all the words? Do I know all the words? Right, if I have to read that page, that's okay. And I was like that. I was sort of like preempting everything. How I actually learn anything is beyond me.
I guess what it looks like that you learn is that you weren't good enough, because one of the things that you said is that rather than the teachers or anybody saying, how do you feel? Looking at this child's shy, why is she shy? Looking deeper into you, you just became, do you see what I mean, where the program becomes more important than the human being. So this human doing has to do these things to suit who? So you do you see what I mean? So we're not doing this for us, we're doing this for someone else. So it becomes a thing that a child has to live its life doing something for someone else. And I'm not saying all children, and I'm not saying all of its life, but what I'm saying is for you as an individual, you need to do better, or you're shy, or you're this. So it's your fault and your responsibility, and you need to figure all this out as a child on your own. In the world that you're scared of, how on earth do you do that? Because did anybody ask you, how do you feel about the world? How's the world treating you? So you weren't asked these, but these were put onto you. So what did you do with that information then? How did that make you feel?
I felt so alien to everybody else. I felt as if I was in a different world, that I just didn't understand how those around me could be just speak to each other, have social lives, and all I wanted to do was get out of there and come home.
Yeah.
And
do you think there might have been other people like you there that you didn't notice them because you were in your world?
I didn't notice because
Yeah.
I was too busy trying to keep myself. I just wanted to be at home. I didn't feel safe at home. I felt safer when I was at home and when I was around my parents, and my mum had to drag me kicking and screaming to school because I didn't want to go. But yet there was that compliance element of me, because when I'd gone too far and she was like, right, just take the day off then, I'd be like, no, I can't. I've got to go to school. It's wrong not to go to school. I've got to go to school. So there was that balance. There was that balance in me, because you have to go to school.
Why do you see what I mean? That it's like a prison. You have to do this. But who are you doing it for? Because it's that way. Well, you need to go and get an education, and you need to go and do this, and it's like, what do I need to do that for? Because your next prison's going to be work, and at work you get told similar. So at school that you can't leave. You will get into trouble. There'll be a consequence if you do. We'll take some of your life as well at home, so you'll be made to do homework. So we're having you there as well. So you're not going to have time to do yourself either. This is the time you're going to have your lunch. This is the food that you're going to eat. You can't go to the toilet without our permission. So you see how it's like a prison. And then when you go to work, it's going to be similar. So you can't leave when you want, because you're answerable to somebody. These are the times that you're going to have your lunch. And there's a gauge in that. So it's like, woo, I can either have my lunch at 12 or 1. Or some people might have a different gauge. These are the hours that you're going to work. And you're going to be agreed to be told what to do and when to do it. And that's what you agree to. So that's similar to being in a prison. So in fact, it's a prison. So you're doing all these things for other people, and yet you were in that and believing we were all in it, really.
I just wanted to do the right thing and just get by without anybody noticing me.
Yeah. And sorry, Del, it's these words that you're saying as well that's in that prison. I wanted to do the right thing. But who told you it was the right thing? For you, it wasn't. For you, the right thing would have been something else, would have been somebody to ask you a question about you, for you to be able to say what's going on that's wrong in your world. But yet, above all of that, the right thing was to go to school for other people. Okay.
I remember saying to my mum that I wish there was somebody in school that you could talk to, because I didn't feel that there was anybody that who was open to conversation,
right,
or anybody that
out of all those adults.
Yeah,
there were no one.
I can remember saying to my mum, I wish there was somebody at school, because I knew I felt different to everybody else.
Do you think that you need one person to speak to in a school, or do you think that the people in the school, who are attending to this, do you think it needs to be more of those people, more of the teachers that need to be on board about what's going on for the child? It's like walking in and only being able to reveal a bit of you, rather than being accepted as a whole person.
Yeah.
If you're taking care of the whole person, then shouldn't you be addressing the whole person? Or do you think that school doesn't have time for that?
I don't think it does. I think at that time, you had a teacher who did a certain subject, and that's what they did.
What was the subject?
Just history or chemistry, and it was just about that. It wasn't, you were there to learn
about something in the past that's nothing to do with you, but not about you.
No, and not I know, like, not questioned about it or not felt there was an opportunity to talk about you as a person. We didn't have those, whether they have them now, and those PHSE lessons and things like that, and we didn't have anything like that.
Means?
Well, it's lessons that they have now in it about supposedly emotional literacy and all that kind of thing.
Right.
But we didn't have anything like that.
And how do those lessons go? Do you know?
No.
Okay.
But we didn't have anything like that, and I think I would have been petrified of them, and that's why I think when I said to Mum, I wish there was somebody I could go and talk to, because obviously I didn't feel, even in class, if they'd have said, "What's your name?" I wouldn't have put my hand up because I'd have frightened out of getting something wrong. So even if we had those lessons, and even in primary school now, how they have circle time and that kind of thing, I wouldn't have felt comfortable saying anything. But my behaviour at home, I did my schoolwork, I did all my homework in front of the TV. I didn't like being in my bedroom or in a room on my own. I had to be in the lounge with Mum and Dad or my sister, and the TV blurting on, and did all my revision and all my homework like that. I didn't like being on my own and silence and stuff like that. And my behaviour at home was very, very different to what it was like at school. But I didn't understand why. I just knew that I was frightened, and I just knew that I'd get angry at home and hit my dad, but I didn't understand why. And I just ended up thinking that there was something wrong with me, and that was bad because other people don't behave like that, and I'm just not a nice person, because I didn't understand where it was coming from. It felt as if it was coming from nowhere.
So did you feel it was just you then, as you reflected on the world?
Yeah.
Do you think some people might look at this video and say, well, you can't change the world, can you? But you can change you, and the way that we've set the world up, like I say, it's normalised, but it's not healthy. So when you go into schools to have these talks to educate people, my opinion is part of what you're doing is to say, we can do it one at a time, just one at a time, and it's looking at that, it's looking at, when I see clients, it's one at a time, just to make a change to that one, and then that one may make a change to another 10. But it's that, and it's just one at a time. It's just, instead of us just saying, well, no, somebody else needs to do this, or we need to complicate it by having meetings or doing this. No, you don't. You just need to ask a question one at a time. So kind of putting that across, because lots of people say, well, what do you want me to do with that information? Whatever you want to do with it. Just do whatever you choose to do with it. But if there's a child, just ask. And that's all it is. It's just ask them.
And exploring, like you say, just ask, don't assume. So if a child is shy, don't just leave it at that. They're like that for a reason.
Yeah.
If a child is angry and acting out, they're doing that for a reason. If a child is being, if you want to use the word naughty, if a child is being disruptive or break things, or there's a reason why they're doing that. And the answer, well, when I was at school, if you just misbehaved, you just got taken out and stood outside, and then would come back in if you behave. And that isn't solving the problem. It's just
shutting it up.
Yeah.
And that's what we're really good at. We were really good at, for anything. If we have a pain, we want to shut it up. We don't want to investigate. We want to shut it up. So it's that. It's validating yourself. and being validated by others, that, you know, validating our humanness and saying, if the body's uncomfortable or it's making a noise by pain or discomfort, don't shut it up. Just ask.
And I think one of the things that I want to do by going into schools and offering to talk to both the staff and the young people is about encouraging people not to assume and just ask, because there's so much that for me is assumptions about certain kind of behaviours and that kind of thing. I know I've spoken to some schools and stuff like that, and they'll say that they haven't got a huge problem in eating disorders or self-harm and that kind of thing, because they only know the few that are visible. And what I'm saying is for those few that's visible, there's an equal amount, if not more, who are invisible, who are hurting themselves or are hurting, but it's not obvious. They haven't got it tattooed on the forehead. They're not stick thin with anorexia nervosa. They're not cutting themselves in a visible place. Might be hurting or hurting themselves in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's about just seeing that person as an individual and exploring that. If somebody had have come and said to me at school, if there was that one person and they'd have said, "Have you been abused?" I'd have gone, "No," because I didn't think I had. I'd put that away in a box. I was just struggling to get through each day, going to school and being a young person and growing up.
Yeah. And
but
sometimes, darling, but sometimes, as some of the things that, although you put some things away, some of the things you've discussed, you didn't even know there was abuse because it was normalised.
Yeah.
So, you know, we normalise the things that we do to our bodies, don't we? Because everybody's doing them, as we've said before. So you've got a long list of things that you've normalised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might have been that when I say I wish there was somebody to talk to, I wouldn't have said, "Oh, this happened when I was little." I would have said that I don't get the same feelings as people at school. I don't want to be here. I get frightened. Everybody's talking about making arrangements for the weekend and going out and I just want to hide at home. It'd have been those things that I'd have talked about, which could have been explored, and then other things come up.
Yeah.
But and that's what I sort of mean when I'm trying to get people to understand about the difference between the trigger and the cause. Like for me, yes, I think I'm thinking now, one of the ways that I did try and keep some sort of control and stuff when I was at school, my eating wasn't disordered in that I had an eating disorder and I was underweight or not getting enough nutritional value, but at high school I had the same lunch every day for 5 years, and I felt that that must have been an element of control for me.
And safety as well.
Yeah.
Then because lots of children like to watch the same program over and over again. I used to do that. Yeah, because it's familiar.
Yeah.
I can't say familiar. I still can't say
familiarity.
Exactly that one.
Every 6-week holidays, the films I watched on the morning were all the, Grease and all the summer holiday and the Elvis films. I watched them at, just on repeat every day in the summer holidays.
Yeah.
And that familiarity and there's no surprises. I know what to expect.
Exactly.
I know I'm going to be comfortable with it.
And you get to know the characters that they play as well, don't you?
Yeah.
In the films, and it's that. Whereas you get older, we like the same things because it's familiarity.
Yeah.
I think I might have said it right. But yeah, it's looking at that safety element, like you say. No nasty surprises. I guess they're the surprises that you don't want, really. And I guess no good surprises, because you might not know how to react to those after, being used to nasty surprises or what you focused on.
I wanted to know everything. I wanted you know, if I went somewhere, who's there, what do you do, where do you go, where do you go in the door if I go somewhere new, what's going to be in there, what's it going to look like, that kind of thing.
And as well, it's sometimes when you meet new people, you might be fearful of what their response to you is going to be, because they're going to go meet you with their own script, and quite often their own script is doctored in it. It's one of these where, when we've spoke about tick boxes, so in health, you have these tick boxes, and if you don't fit this criteria, then you're a liar or you're wrong, because your humanness can get dehumanized. Sometimes you have to look a certain way or be a certain way to fit into this box. So, but not everybody does, and so we, you know, even that, the individuality gets removed as well as an individual. So, say sometimes if you have someone with depression, you might tick all these boxes that, you know, they're lethargic, they can't be bothered, they may not wash, or they may not do all those things. So if you get, say, somebody, or if I see somebody and they have depression but they don't look like that, because that's part of their hiding. So they might have a full face of makeup and look really well, but actually the weller that they look, the iller they are, because they put on that extra effort to hide it, like you, so they're not asked. Don't ask me. To the world, I need to look like this. And that might be because they come from a family who, it was like beaten down if you look bad. So they have to put up a front and say, I'm going to show you that you're not going to hurt me. And you know, it could be, you know, all of that, what's going on for them. And so for you, it looks similar to what you're doing.
I didn't want anybody to know that they had an impact on me.
Yeah.
So
and that power.
Yeah. So even when I was like naughty or did something wrong at home and I'd get a smack, there was no way I would cry in front of my mum or anybody. There were no way. If we were watching a sad film and my mum and sister were crying, I'd sit there and go and cry on my own. I wouldn't let anybody see an impact on me.
Why?
I don't know. It just felt that I had to have a guard up and not let anybody know that I was vulnerable, or that I felt those things. And I think because I suppressed them for so long, they just disappeared. I didn't feel those things anymore. I could watch the films and stuff and not be bothered by them, and so I'd get, oh, you're hard, you are, you're tough, you are, you deal with everything, you are, no phases you, and that kind of
when inside
yeah,
you were feeling totally the opposite, but had this battle going on that no one else could see. And it's those things that part of you being invisible. And there's lots of people that want to be invisible in, you know, in that way. So they present themselves in a certain way that the person, and it goes on looks, like we've discussed before, everything. Well, you look fine. You look fine. You know, you can go around and say, well, she looks fine, and she looks fine, and she looks fine. But you can say that if you like, but it doesn't mean it's true.
I know, because when I was at, a couple of things that's made me think about, when I was at university, I was exactly the same and kept myself to myself, did my work, and all those kind of things. And halfway through the course, I went to my tutor who didn't know I exist and said, I was that low in my self-esteem. We'd just done an exam and I thought I'd failed it because I had a blackout in it, and I went to him and I said, oh, just to let you know, this is who I am, and I will have failed that exam, so I'm going to have to resit it, so I'm just going to tell you when's resit dates and this, that and other. And I got talking to him, and he was like, I wouldn't not known any of this, about how low I felt about myself, because then he'd like try and help me and take me out of the library on the night and that kind of thing, and take essays off me that I'd written, but then I'd rewrite them the next day. And he was like, wouldn't know any of this, and that mirrors what one of the psychiatrists I was working with for a long time, he's he said I was a really good actress. Nobody would have a clue because I'd learned how to mask it from that very early age, because I felt wrong and felt that I didn't fit in with anybody else.
Could you see how...
I copied them.
Yeah, from what you were doing, could you see how there was no room for you? So that you learned that there's... Because that's what we do, don't we? It's like when... so when children want to express their emotions, they might have a tantrum or stamp or anything to let their anger out, but there's no room. So it's go to your room. I don't want to see you when you're like that. Come back when you're in a better mood. Come back when you're this, instead of being asked, you know, what's making you so angry? You know, let's talk about this and see if we can calm this down a little bit. So instead of learning or being asked, this is how, you know, this is how we deal with emotions, you're actually shut down.
Yeah,
so from a very young age, you can...
Because my mum said, didn't she, when I said, I wish there was somebody at school to talk to, she went, oh, that's a good idea. She didn't say, what do you want to talk about? What are you struggling with? We didn't have those conversations at home. It was just like, oh, that's a good idea. Next thing, what are you having for your tea? And it was all... Yeah. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about aspirations. I remember when I was at college, my tutor rang my mum. My mum's only told me this years later. My tutor rang my mum and said she's applied for nurse training. I think she needs to set a standard a little bit higher and do medicine. And we said, don't tell her. She won't be able to cope with stress. She gets stressed out. Because I were always doing my school work and my work and paranoid that I wasn't good enough and I'm not going to do well, I'm going to fail this one, She's like, don't tell her, she can't do it with stress. But didn't have a conversation with me about it, or nobody had a conversation with me about how I was getting really good grades, but yet I felt totally worthless and that kind of thing. And I guess that's one thing, going back to what I like to mention in schools, is that when I first was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa and had a breakdown and depression and the OCD diagnosis came and everything, it was because of the stress of the exams at university. She's got no self-esteem, she doesn't think very well of herself.
Where did they think you got all these things from?
That's it, nobody asked. That they put that as down as the trigger and the cause.
Okay.
And what I want to go into schools and say is, yes, that was the trigger, but the cause was something different. And if you can stop thinking about the shy, the quiet, the naughty, that stops you thinking. We need to go back to the cause. Why are they like that? So I want to just enlighten people about that. There are two things. The trigger and the cause might not be the same issue.
Does this give you a voice to go into schools? Because there's a reason why you go into schools, and you didn't have the voice when you were at school. Is this affording you the voice to go in and say, you know, now, actually, these are the things I would have liked to say back then?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's also about, when I do school assemblies to the young people, it's all about saying as well, no matter what it is, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, that you're frightened of, no matter how trivial you think it is, no matter anything, whatever it is, that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it for a number of reasons. I'm doing it for those young people who are suffering in silence.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it for those adults around those children, to say, you can make or break a young person. They're not learners. Come in and talk to our learners. They're not learners, they're not pupils, they're individuals, they're people, and how you are with them can make or break them.
Yeah, and you're right, because, you know, when the biggest impact that I often see is, if it's not their environment growing up at home, it's in school. You know, there's always, the teachers mentioned in either a good way, that this one person, and it always becomes a scarcity, but they'll always mention the teachers that weren't nice. These are the impacts that I had. And, you know, it's like anything. You can go anywhere and say, oh, wow, they were nice to me, as if it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, wow, is that how abnormal? Why isn't that normal? That we wouldn't mention that somebody was so nice to me and they treat me really well. It's like, wow, how do you normally get treated?
I did that the other day. I was out with a friend and we'd grabbed some lunch, and the young lad who brought it to us, and he was so nice. I'm like, oh, wasn't he lovely? He was really nice. And I sort of said, isn't it funny how we see this as being exceptional and out of the ordinary, because we're
Exactly.
used to just be having stuff thrown at you, or self-service, you do it yourself, then you've got no interaction.
Or no, you know, and sometimes you can see people's misery, so they're miserable with you and things like that, but it is where you, you know, we almost normalise, and we do actually, our awful behaviour. It seems, it's like a talked about thing. She did that, he did that, they did that, they did that, they did that. Instead of saying, as an individual, what am I doing and how am I impacting the world? How do I want to impact the world when I get up in the morning? What is it? What is my intention? And if I don't, then what actually has been going on for me?
It's funny that what you said, actually, somebody I know a couple of weeks ago sent me a message when I said, oh, I've just done a school assembly, and I was pleased that the school actually wanted me to do a whole school assembly, recognising that there are young people struggling that they know, but there's equally a lot of young people struggling that they don't know.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, that was, I was really chuffed that the school actually saw that and took that on board.
Yeah, and it's not the school, is it? It's the people. The people
the
saw
people
that.
within the school.
Yeah, those individual people as a collective have recognised that, and that's, you know.
And she said in a text, well, I'm glad that something positive is coming out of something so negative and so horrendous.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's she talking about? Then I had to remember that my situation isn't nice, but I've normalised my bringing up. I've normalised how I am as an adult, that I didn't get when she went, something horrendous has happened. And it took me a couple of seconds to think, oh, she's talking, because this isn't, but I've normalised it to make it that, to be able to get through, basically.
Yeah.
But I don't want other young people to have to do that.
And I guess lots of them already have, because as a society we've normalised the way that we are. We've, you know, because we're so used to it that we think it's such a big effort. But all the effort you have to put into it is stop. And that can be, you know, in the egoic thinking, I can't just stop that. But you can. You just have to try. Are you okay to end there? Okay.